from the muddy trenches of Europe to the digital battlefields of the 21st century. This is the complete catalog of the evolution of the American tank. Let's start with the genesis, spanning 1917 to 1930. Holt Gas Electric, the experiment, the very first American attempt at a tank. Built on a tractor chassis, it was too heavy and clumsy to see combat, but it proved that American industry could build armor. M1917 Light Tank, the copy, America's first mass-produced tank. It was a near-identical clone of the French Renault FT. Though it arrived too late for World War I, it trained the first generation of U.S. tankers, including a young George Patton. Ford 3-ton, the Swarm, a tiny two-man tankette designed by car manufacturer Ford using Model T engines. The idea was to swarm the enemy with thousands of cheap tanks, but the war ended before the strategy could be tested. Mark 8 Liberty, the International, a massive joint project between the US and Britain. Designed to cross the widest trenches of the Western Front, it was a 40-ton beast that became obsolete the moment the war ended. Next, the interwar years and the cavalry era, 1930 to 1939. T-1 Cunningham, the Pioneer, the very first tank designed and built entirely in America after World War I. Tiny and armed with a 37mm gun, it was the grandfather of all U.S. light tanks. Christie M1931, the race car, designed by genius J. Walter Christie. It used a revolutionary suspension that allowed it to drive on tracks or wheels at highway speeds. Rejected by the US, it became the father of the Soviet T-34. M1 combat car, the loophole. Because the US Defense Act forbade the cavalry from having tanks, they built this and called it a combat car. Fast and armed only with machine guns, it was designed for speed, not slugging matches. M2 light tank, the twin turrets, an odd design featuring two separate machine gun turrets side by side. It looked like a quirky robot face, but it taught engineers the difficulty of coordinating multiple turrets. M2 medium tank, the blueprint, the direct ancestor of the Sherman. It introduced the sloped front armor and the suspension system that would define American tanks for the next decade. Marmon Harrington CTLS, the export, a light tank originally built for the Dutch but taken over by the U.S. Marines. It saw desperate combat in the defense of the Philippines. M3 Stuart, the Honey, the first American tank to fight the Nazis. Used by the British in North Africa, they loved its reliability and speed so much they nicknamed it Honey. Now, the World War II legends, 1941 to 1945. M3 Lee, the Stopgap, a strange tank with a 75mm gun in the hull and a 37mm gun in a turret. It was a desperate measure to get a heavy gun onto the battlefield quickly. It saved the British at El Alamein but was a high-profile target. LVT 4 Water Buffalo, the Beach Stormer, an amphibious tractor that saved the U.S. Marines in the Pacific. Could climb over coral reefs where boats got stuck, delivering troops directly onto the sand. M5 Stuart, the upgrade, the successor to the M3. It featured a sloped hull and twin Cadillac V8 engines. It was fast, quiet, and reliable, serving as the primary scout tank for the U.S. Army until 1944. M8 Scott, the Stubby Scout, a Stuart light tank with the turret removed and replaced by a short 75mm howitzer. It provided close-range explosive support in the jungles of the Pacific. M4 Sherman, the legend, the most famous American tank in history. It wasn't the strongest, but it was reliable, easy to repair, and produced in overwhelming numbers. It was the tank that won the war through sheer logistics. T-34 Calliope, the organ player, a Sherman tank fitted with a launcher for 60 rockets. It produced a terrifying screaming sound as it unleashed a barrage of explosives to saturate enemy positions. M4A3E2 Jumbo, the Wall, a heavily up-armored version of the Sherman. With extra steel welded to its front and turret, it was used to lead columns and draw enemy fire, bouncing shells that would destroy a standard Sherman. M4A3E8 EZ8, the Peak, the ultimate version of the Sherman. It featured a wider suspension for a smoother ride and a high-velocity 76mm gun that could finally knock out German Tigers from the side. M22 Locust, the Airborne, designed to be dropped from gliders. It was so small the turret had to be removed to fit in the plane. Innovative, but too lightly armored to survive on the main battlefield. M24 Chaffee, the perfect light. Replacing the Stuart late in the war, it carried a potent 75mm gun on a fast, light chassis. It is often considered the best light tank of World War II. M19 GMC, the Twin Fong. Built on the Chaffee chassis, its twin 40mm guns were designed for anti-air but proved terrifyingly effective against infantry. T-77 MGMC, the Leadstorm, an experimental Chaffee mounting 6 heavy machine guns, designed to create a wall of bullets against low-flying planes. Next, the Tank Destroyers and Artillery, 1942 to 1945. M10 Wolverine, the Seeker, America's first dedicated tank destroyer. Built on a Sherman chassis with an open-top turret, it carried a 3-inch gun designed specifically to hunt panzers. M18 Hellcat, the Speed Demon, the fastest tracked armored vehicle of the war, capable of hitting 80 kilometers per hour. It used its speed to flank German heavy tanks, hit them in the rear, and vanish. Super Hellcat, the Glass Cannon, a field modification combining the speed of the Hellcat with the massive 90mm turret of the Jackson. The ultimate hit-and-run vehicle. M36 Jackson, the Slugger. When the M10 couldn't penetrate the Tiger, the US fitted a massive 90mm anti-aircraft gun onto the chassis. It was the only American vehicle capable of destroying a Tiger I from the front at long range. M7 Priest, the Pulpit, a 105mm howitzer mounted on a tank chassis. Named the Priest because the machine gun ring looked like a church pulpit, it provided rapid artillery support. M12 GMC, the King Kong, a massive 155mm gun mounted on a tank chassis. It was used to smash concrete bunkers at point-blank range during the invasion of Germany. M40 GMC, the Long Arm, an even larger 155mm long tom gun mounted on a widened Sherman chassis. It leveled entire city blocks in the Battle of Cologne. Moving to the late war monsters, 1944 to 1945. M6 Heavy Tank, the Failure, America's early attempt at a heavy tank. Massive and weighing 57 tons, it suffered from terrible mobility and never saw combat. T-28 Super Heavy, the Doom Turtle, designed to breach the Siegfried Line. Weighing 95 tons with no turret, it was so wide it had a second set of tracks that had to be removed just to fit on trains. M26 Pershing, the Answer, the heavy tank that arrived just in time for the end of the war. With a powerful 90mm gun, it was the first American tank that could stand toe-to-toe with the German Panther. T-26E4 Super Pershing, the Franken tank, a field-modified Pershing with a longer gun and improvised armor plates cut from captured German Panthers. Built to hunt King Tigers. T-29 Heavy Tank, the Counter Tiger, designed to kill the German King Tiger. It featured a massive turret and a powerful 105mm gun. Though it missed the war, it paved the way for modern American heavy armor. T-30 Heavy Tank, the Knockout King, the brother of the T-29, armed with a colossal 155mm gun. Its shells were so heavy it required a mechanical loader assist. T-32 Heavy, the Bunker Buster, a Pershing on steroids with a massive turret and thick armor, designed to smash through heavy fortifications. T-34 Heavy Tank, the Heavy Slugger, an American monster armed with a massive 120mm anti-aircraft gun adapted for ground combat. Designed to punch through the thickest armor from long range. Next, the Cold War and the Age of Pattons, 1946 to 1989. M46 Patton, the Tiger Tamer, an upgraded Pershing that saw heavy combat in Korea. Its 90mm gun proved effective against Soviet T-34s painted with tiger faces. M47 Patton, the Transition, a stopgap tank with a new turret on an M46 hull. Produced in huge numbers, it found a second life in the armies of American allies like Austria and Jordan. M53/M55, the Heavy Hitter, the bridge between World War II and modern artillery. Unlike earlier guns, it featured a fully enclosed rotating turret to protect the crew from nuclear fallout. M41 Walker Bulldog, the Scout, fast and agile with a high-velocity 76mm gun. It served with distinction in Vietnam, designed to hunt other light tanks. M42 Duster, the Sweeper, an anti-aircraft tank with twin 40mm Bofors cannons. In Vietnam, it was rarely used against planes but was devastating against infantry assaults in the jungle. T-92 Light Tank, the Alien, a radical experiment to replace the Walker Bulldog. It had an extremely low profile and a cleft turret design that looked like something from science fiction. M103 Heavy, the Hammer, America's last true heavy tank. Designed to counter the Soviet IS-3, it carried a massive 120mm gun. It was so heavy and slow it served primarily with the Marines. Chrysler TV-8, the Nuclear Dream, a strange prototype designed to be powered by a nuclear reactor. The crew would have sat inside a massive pod-like turret floating in water. It remains one of the weirdest designs in history. M50 Ontus, the Shotgun, a pyramid-shaped tank destroyer armed with 6 106mm recoilless rifles. It could fire a salvo of 6 shots in seconds, devastating enemy positions in Hue City. M56 Scorpion, the Mosquito, an airborne anti-tank gun with 0 armor protection for the crew. It relied entirely on being small and airdroppable. T-54E1, the Gunslinger, an experiment in firepower. It featured an oscillating turret and a revolver-style autoloader, allowing it to fire multiple rounds in rapid succession. T-69, the autoloader. Inspired by French designs, this tank featured an oscillating turret and an automatic loading system for rapid fire. T-57 Heavy, the Heavy Revolver, an evolution of the heavy tank featuring a massive oscillating turret and an autoloader, intended to match Soviet heavy tanks. M48 Patton, the Warrior, the first completely new design after World War II. With a distinct curved turtle shell turret, it became the workhorse of the Vietnam War. M107, the Sniper, a long-range 175mm self-propelled gun. In Vietnam, it could fire shells over 30 kilometers, hitting targets across the border with extreme precision. M60 Patton, the Iron Horse, the definitive Cold War tank. It introduced the 105mm British gun and diesel engine, standing guard on the border of East Germany for decades. M60A2 Starship, the spaceship, a futuristic failure. It featured a strange, narrow turret and a gun that could fire both shells and missiles. The technology was too complex and unreliable. M728CV, the Demolitionist. Based on the M60, it carried a short-barrel 165mm demolition gun designed to shatter concrete bunkers and clear obstacles. MBT-70, the Super Tank, a joint project between the US and Germany. It had hydropneumatic suspension and a driver seated in the turret. Too expensive to produce, but its tech lived on in the Abrams. M551 Sheridan, the Aluminum Coffin, an airborne light tank made of aluminum. It could fire missiles, but its armor was thin, and its ammunition was prone to catching fire. XM800T, the Speedster, an experimental scout vehicle with a 20mm autocannon. Incredibly fast and designed to sneak behind enemy lines. M113 APC, the Battle Taxi, the most widely used armored personnel carrier in history. A simple aluminum box on tracks that carried American infantry through the jungles of Vietnam and the deserts of Iraq. T-114, the Bat, a tiny, amphibious scout vehicle armed with a recoilless rifle. Small, fast, and hard to detect. M163 VADS, the Buzzsaw, an M113 fitted with a 20mm Vulcan rotary cannon. Designed for anti-air, it was mostly used to shred ground targets with 3,000 rounds per minute. M247 Sergeant York, the Disaster, an ambitious radar-guided anti-aircraft tank. Infamous for targeting latrines instead of drones during tests, leading to its cancellation. Finally, the modern era 1980 to present. M1 Abrams, the Whisper, named Whispering Death, for its quiet turbine engine. It revolutionized tank warfare with Chobham composite armor. HSTV-L, the spaceship, the high survivability test vehicle, a futuristic prototype designed to be fast, low, and hard to kill with a rapid-fire 75mm gun. M2 Bradley, the Partner, an infantry fighting vehicle designed to keep up with the Abrams. Armed with a 25mm chain gun and tow missiles, it destroyed more Iraqi tanks in Desert Storm than the Abrams did. M109 Paladin, the Thunder, the backbone of U.S. artillery. The modern versions are digitally linked, able to stop, fire, and move before the first shell hits the ground. M270 MLRS, the Grid Remover, a tracked rocket launcher that can fire 12 rockets in less than a minute, capable of deleting an entire grid square of territory. AV-7, the battle bus, the monster of the Marines, a massive amphibious troop carrier that launches from ships and swims to shore. M8 AGS, the lost contender, designed to replace the Sheridan. Fast, light, and armed with an autoloader. It was cancelled only for the Army to realize decades later that they needed it. Stingray, the Commando, private venture light tank. With a 105mm gun on a light chassis, it packs the punch of a main battle tank in a small package. ADATS, the dual threat, a missile carrier based on the Bradley. Its massive missiles were capable of destroying both aircraft and tanks with equal efficiency. M1A1 Abrams, the heavy hitter, the Gulf War legend, upgraded with a German-designed 120mm smoothbore gun to penetrate any tank in the world. M1A2 SEPV-3, the digital fortress, the current king, featuring depleted uranium armor, active protection systems, and a digital network that shares targets with drones and jets. M10 Booker, the new blood, the newest vehicle in the U.S. arsenal. Not a tank, but mobile protected firepower. It brings a 105mm gun to light infantry divisions.